Hello, and welcome to another Dune lore video. The first film in Denis Villeneuve's two-part adaptation of Frank Herbert's beloved science fiction novel is on its way. And in anticipation of its release, I've been exploring this universe's intricate characters. However, in this video, I'd like to delve into what I think is one of the more interesting aspects of the Duniverse, that being space travel and the mysterious organization that has monopolized it, the Spacing Guild. In Frank Herbert's novel, the ships that transport the entirety of House Atreides from their homeworld of Caladan to the desert planet of Arrakis are called Heighliners. These are ships owned by the Spacing Guild that are so immense in size that they're able to hold many thousands of passengers, equipment, and goods. The novel doesn't include very many details on the ship design, just that they are enormous in size. So other than that, there is definitely some room for creative liberties to be taken with the design. The 1984 film and the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries in the year 2000 both depicted the Guild ships as gigantic cylindrical vessels. However, this detail is not described in the book. In the Dune Encyclopedia, it states that Heigliners were a globular shape. But it is sort of an obscure reference. I'm not sure whether or not any artist will be looking to any prior renderings as a source from which they'll base their design. So at this moment, it's really hard to know exactly how Denis Villeneuve will choose to depict these ships. His inspiration may not stem from anything we've seen previously. And since other creators have taken certain liberties with Frank Herbert's novel, it would make sense that Denis might do that as well. He could be basing ship design on simply his own imagination and the images that came to mind when he read the book. I actually admire that about Frank Herbert's world-building technique. I like the fact that there isn't much exposition in this story that includes minute details about ship design and detailing all the specifics of the Heighliner engines and how they work. I would end up feeling like I am reading an encyclopedia, and it would take away from the experience and the flow of the story. World building is done through the characters' experiences, revealing details that are only necessary to the story, which allows for your imagination to fill in the rest. The concept of space travel in this universe is presented in a vastly different way than what we're used to seeing in a science fiction property. In Star Trek, for example, ships travel through space due to a propulsion system known as warp drive. And of course, there is loads of other technology assisting in this process. And other science fiction franchises use a similar concept. In Dune, faster-than-light travel is achieved exclusively by the Spacing Guild and their ship's engines, with the practical application of the Holtzman effect, which is the idea of folding space to achieve instantaneous space travel. However, folding space is extremely risky unless you're able to chart a safe course. I think Han Solo summed up the importance of this best.
Traveling through hyperspace ain't like dust and crops, boy. Without precise calculations, we'd fly right through a star or bounce too close to a supernova and that'd end your trip real quick, wouldn't it?
However, in Dune, navigators don't exist. In this universe, all computing technology is banned, so there is no way to digitally chart coordinates. So this meant that humans would need to get creative. In his book, Frank Herbert wanted to delve into what mankind's development would be over time, without the focus being on the technology of the future. When the story of Dune begins, we become aware of this unique aspect of this universe. The Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohayim of the Bene Gesserit comes to visit Paul, and she goes on to relate that thousands of years ago, humans had reached a point in their development where they had turned their thinking over to machines, and had thus become enslaved by them. 10,000 years ago, the Great Conflict, referred to as the Butlerian Jihad, led to the banishment of all machines made in the likeness of a human mind. She continues in her account of history, saying that it forced human minds to develop. Schools were started to train human talents, and that the two chief survivors of those ancient schools were the Bene Gesserit and the Spacing Guild. Like the Bene Gesserit, the Spacing Guild is an immensely powerful organization and is equally secretive to outsiders. The Bene Gesserit, Mentats, and members of the Spacing Guild came to further their human talents and abilities over thousands of years to a superhuman degree, and evolving to a point of being able to perform functions that had previously been done by machines. And just like the Bene Gesserit, the drug spice, more formally known as melange, is an integral part of the Guild's inner workings. With the aid of spice, the Bene Gesserit can access their female ancestral memories, as well as enable them to see into the future to a limited degree. Members of the Spacing Guild who become navigators are entirely dependent on spice and require vast amounts of the drug so as to heighten their senses to the point of having multi-dimensional awareness, which enables them to foresee and navigate safe paths for space travel. In the book, this ability is also described as them questing ahead through time to find the safest course. It's basically the Dune version of a navicomputer. Before the Guild Navigators existed, interstellar travel was still possible. However, because there was no way of knowing whether or not the course was safe, about 1 in every 8 ships that attempted faster-than-light travel by means of the Holtzman engines would be destroyed. It was essentially Russian roulette in space. This is why the Navigator's ability to chart safe courses became so crucial in the universe of Dune. So because the Guild maintains the entire monopoly on space travel, they can charge whatever fees they want for their ships and their services. Because they've cornered the market, they are able to wield tremendous power and influence in the galaxy, and can easily turn the tide of the political landscape if they so choose. They mostly exert their influence in the political arena to maintain their dominance over the universe's economy. Overall, they couldn't care less who is ruling the Empire as long as the spice keeps flowing, not only to meet their economic goals, but also because they have become completely and utterly dependent upon the substance. Spice is incredibly addictive, and withdrawals from it can be deadly, especially to those who ingest quantities to the levels that the members of the Spacing Guild do. Over time, the spice mutates its members until they reach the senior rank as Guild Navigator, which is the most prestigious position in the Guild. By the time they reach this point, they have long lost any part that once made them human. In order to become a navigator, its members must consume large quantities of spice and are gradually mutated by it, to where they then have to be continuously immersed in a tank filled with a highly concentrated version of the substance that exists in gaseous form. The Guild is just as jealous of its privacy as it is of its domination of space travel. It is strictly forbidden for anyone outside of the Guild to attempt to see one of these navigators. In the book, Paul expresses interest in trying to get a glimpse of one of the Guildsmen. However, he is quickly corrected by his father, who warns that by doing so, their house would be risking their shipping privileges. I am curious to see if Denis Villeneuve will bring these mysterious Guild navigators into his film. I'd really like to see exactly what Denis would have in mind if he were to choose to present these creatures on screen, as previous adaptations have. The Spacing Guild is talked about often in the story of Dune, and certainly their heavy influence is felt throughout. However, while other Guild members are seen briefly in the novel, the senior Guild navigators themselves are not physically encountered in Frank Herbert's first novel. Actually, they are not even described until the second book in his series, Dune Messiah. In the first chapter of that novel, a Guild navigator is described as a humanoid fish. In his tank of spice gas, he is an elongated figure, vaguely humanoid, with finned feet and hugely fanned membranous hands. He is a fish in a strange sea. I've seen artist renderings that kind of look like the creature from the Black Lagoon, and that's how I usually pictured them when I read the books. It certainly has been interesting to see the previous adaptations of these beings and how the artists imagined them. David Lynch's version certainly took the most dramatic approach with the navigators. This is probably the most famous scene in this film. It's definitely visually striking and memorable. Again, there was some creative liberty taken here by including this scene in the first place, which I presume was to demonstrate the great influence the Guild holds in the universe, and how even the Emperor yields to their commands. So, to a degree, I can understand including a scene like this for that reason. The navigators themselves in the 1984 film looked more like a giant worm-like squid with little human hands. Either way, they don't really seem fish-like, and notably do not have the deep blue eyes of spice saturation. I'm not ultra fond of the close-up shots of the Navigator, however the tank itself does look like a strange sea within. Very eerie looking. Taking these different approaches into account, it definitely makes me wonder what approach Denis Villeneuve will use to depict space travel and the heavy influence the Spacing Guild holds in the universe. He has said he's going by what's in the book, and if it's based solely on this entry in the Duniverse, we may have vastly different ship designs than we were thinking of, and also we may not see the navigators at all. If he does include them, I think it may be similar to the miniseries in that we, the audience, will get a glimpse, but not the characters in the story. Villeneuve certainly has a good reputation of creating visually stunning imagery, so if it is done right, this could be one of the most visually intriguing scenes of the first movie. If he does choose to include the navigators in this way, then I am very interested in seeing his interpretation of them and how he imagined them when he first read Frank Herbert's epic story. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did, and be sure to subscribe for more Dune and other sci-fi and fantasy content. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and speculations on the Spacing Guild and the navigators themselves. Do you think Denis will include them in his adaptation? What are your thoughts on the previous attempts to depict them? Thank you all so much for your support, and as always, have a very nerdy day.